Hello, Namaskar, Vanakkam. In this particular video, I'm going to explain the medicine bag, which is the last story of your Prism textbook written by Virginia Driving Hawk. Uh, it's a rather sentimental story. It's a story you would recall the Chief Seattle's speech, which was there in your treasure trove, the first chapter, which you would have studied in class 9 ICSC. This one, in a sense, is a bit of an extension of that story in the sense that it comes from the same kind of an domain, same kind of ecosystem. Uh, it's a story that talks about the relationship between the present generation and two generations before that, and a great grandfather, great grandchild kind of a relationship, and more importantly, the passing of a tradition. So those are the larger themes. I'm going to be discussing those in detail before we get to the word by word, line by line explanation. One more thing I wanted to tell you. I'd initially thought that I would be preparing the question bank or the success test papers, but time ki bahut kami hai. There is a real problem of time, and I am recommending the Oswald question bank. Now, there are two things which you can do. Either you can purchase the Oswald ISC Class 12 English Literature question bank. Now, this comes with a range of questions, especially the stuff on Macbeth is pretty good. Even on the poems and stories, they have a large range of questions according to the latest format, and they have marked it whether it is an understanding based question, whether it is an analysis based question, whether it is an evaluation based question, right? Both for Macbeth as well as for Prism and Rhapsody. They will also be releasing sample test papers, I think sometime after September, right? So it's entirely your choice whether you want to go in for question bank plus sample test papers. Why I would say that you should not take a chance is for the simple reason that 2025 will be the first batch that will be appearing for the Macbeth, Prism and Rhapsody. So in that sense, it is like, a challenge. You don't know what to expect. Yours will be the first batch. So don't take any chances. What I say, my suggestion is go for my explanation video, understand the entire poem, story and Macbeth in great detail. Then for Prism and Rhapsody, I have been putting some short notes on the Instagram page, Study with Sudhir Instagram page. Make use of that. Apart from that, the line by line explanation, please note it down while I'm explaining. It will really help you revise when you see it in your own handwriting. Okay. And then look at this question bank and the sample test papers, plus the item bank, which has been put by the council on its own website. So you have these three options, which will be more than enough to prepare you well for the English literature paper. If you are going for Oswald, please make sure that you follow the link that I have given, which will lead to their website. Why I'm saying the website and not Amazon is for the simple reason that I have convinced Oswald to give a 10% additional discount to Study with Sudhir subscribers if you use the Sudhir 10 discount coupon code. That's all. It's entirely up to you. Okay. It's only to ensure that your parents save that extra bit of money, because I do understand that you would be having to buy books for many more subjects. Okay, so this is a small, let's say, gift from my side. So with that, let's get started with this information, because I was having to reply to too many comments. So I thought, let me put this right at the outset so that there is no confusion. So that's as far as literature is concerned. I will be doing the grammar test papers, grammar only, for ISC 11th and 12th, like I did last year, the grammar test series. That I'll be putting sometime again. Give me a month or so. By September second half, I should be able to put that out. So that will be as far as 11th and 12th ISC is concerned. So let's get started with the medicine bag. Lamba video hoga to kafi time lagega, because as is my habit, I will not do a 12-15 minute ka video. I will do it in great detail. Okay. Tata, bye bye. Nahi, tata, bye bye. Nahi. Let's get started.
Okay. So the medicine bag. Now, what kind of a story is this? Now, it's a short story written by Virginia Driving Hawk Sneeve, and it was published in 1975. So in that sense, it's not a very old story. Okay, we are talking about what, less than 50 years ago in the Boy's Life magazine. And more importantly, it reflects on the relationship between a Sioux man and his great grandson. Okay, And the backdrop to this story are the themes of identity and heritage. Please remember these two words and use them in your answers. Keywords, I keep telling the keywords while I'm explaining the story. It's not as though I will thereafter make a list of these are the keywords and all that. That doesn't operate this way. And for those who have studied with me in class 9 and 10, know exactly what the style is. Okay. So who are the Sioux, pronounced as Sioux as I've written here, also known as the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota? Sioux are Native American tribes. As I said, remember the Chief Seattle speech. They're indigenous to the Great Plains of North America. Indigenous means that's where they lived. They are known for their rich cultural heritage. All these lines are important from the point of view of a 10-mark answer. Please remember this. This is the kind of language that you also need to write, because in the 10-mark question, you will be asked about a theme in which you will need to push in a bit of the background information about the tribes in this particular case. So please note down this kind of language which you can use in your answers. Okay. So the cultural heritage includes what? Traditional ceremonies involving the medicine bag in this case, storytelling and art. And Sioux men, like men in many other cultures, fulfill various roles within their communities, including hunting. I mean, this is what would be the nature of their leadership: hunting, leadership, preserving cultural practices. And they have historically been recognized for their bravery, horsemanship, and deep spiritual connection to the land. Isme ye point important. Deep spiritual connection to their land. This point is important. Okay. Now, I just created this image, the USA is shown, and this may have been what the great grandfather may have looked like. Okay. Now, about the author, an American author who focused on children's book, children's literature, and Aboriginal Americans is the term used to refer to the indigenous tribes of Americas in North, Central, and South America, as well as the Caribbean. Caribbean as in Achka, you're talking about the West Indies, the West Indies cricket team, that for those of you who follow cricket and would be familiar. Now, these indigenous people are the descendants. They came from the original inhabitants of these regions and who have lived there for thousands of years prior to the arrival of the European settlers. Basically, America is the land of the immigrants, right? Many people from Europe, etc., came there and started living there, and the original tribes were kind of pushed out. That's what the resentment was. Now, these people had very different kind of culture. They had very different kind of language and history. All these aspects are important in the context of the story, which is why isko padhna zaruri hai story mein jaane se pehle. Because once you understand the background, the context, and the theme of the story, it will become that much easier for you to understand and appreciate. Appreciate to hoga hi, because it's a very nice emotional story. And it's a bit like the paper menagerie in class 11 in terms of the emotion, the emotional quotient. And they've often had unique relationships with the lands they inhabit. Again, I'm taking you back to the Chief Seattle speech. Terms like Native American, First Nations, indigenous peoples are also used for these population. Now, what's the story about? Now, this is a story about a boy called Martin who lives with his parents, and he has a younger sister. And this relationship between his great-grandfather, that is his mother's father's father, who belongs to the Native American land of South Dakota. And Martin is conscious about his grandfather's unexpected visit, great-grandfather, because in the story also they keep referring to him as the grandfather. Where is the book? 1 second. In the book also, if you see, they keep referring to him as a grandpa, right? The great-grandfather. So it is only towards the end that we kind of understand that, see, I kept the bag until my son, that is your mother's father. So his son was the father of Martin's mother. So that makes him, Martin is his great-grandchild. So Martin is conscious about his great-grandfather's looks, and he feels a little embarrassed because he has created a particular image of this great-grandfather with his friends, and he's a little embarrassed that he would look like the photograph that I just now showed you, and he may not live up to the expectations. Again, an important phrase which you can use in your 5-mark answers. Okay. However, his friends are deeply appreciative of his grandpa when one day they meet him and find him very charming and exotic. Again, words which you can use in your answers. In the second half of the story, the grandfather tells Martin that he was aware of his awkwardness, right? And he makes him familiar with his ancestry, that is, with his past, the tradition, the culture, in order to convey the emotional significance of the medicine bag that has been around his neck for years. And since he's growing old, he wants to pass it on to the male heir. And he could not have passed it to his mother, Martin's mother. So he had to pass it on to Martin, even though his father is a white man. Okay. And the story ends with Martin wearing the bag after his great grandfather's death. Okay. So there is a sense of mixed identity because he's the child of a Sioux plus a white man. So there is a mixed identity, but it is something which leaves him with rather mixed kind of emotions. Now, what are the themes that we are going to talk about? We are going to talk about the importance of culture. We are going to talk about the need for intergenerational harmony. Beautiful concept. Beautiful concept. I felt very moved. And I think, all of us have a lot to learn from something like this. Like, I was remembering my grandmother who lived up to the age of 101. Fantastic woman. I mean, I've spent a large amount period of my childhood with my grandmother, telling a lot of Hindu mythological stories. All my knowledge about Hindu mythology is courtesy of my grandmother. So you learn a lot because of those kind of connections. So, never be embarrassed of your grandparents. Your friends come and your grandmother or your grandfather is sitting there and they do some small talk with your friends. Don't feel embarrassed ever. Never, ever feel embarrassed because they have a lot to give always. Always remember this. And you will only gain something from their company. Everything cannot be found on WhatsApp and Quora and Snapchat and other silly social media platforms. Your grandparents would be able to tell you much more because they come rich in experience and have a lot of stories to tell often. Okay. So the themes of respect for tradition, the generational gap, and death and transition. So these are the large themes that we are talking about. So now let's get into the story, the line by line explanation. Okay. My kid sister Cheryl and I bragged about our Sioux grandpa, Joe Iron Shell. Now, this is the name that you need to obviously remember. Okay, this is the name of the great grandfather. Our friends who had always lived in the city, now bragged means boasted. Okay, that they spoke very highly about their Sioux grandpa. Our friends who had always lived in the city and only knew about Indians from movies and TV were impressed by our stories. That thought, wow, how exotic, how fantastic, how fascinating. Okay, so they would be very impressed by the stories that Cheryl and the protagonist would tell, the narrator would tell. Maybe we exaggerated. Exaggerated means to kind of thoda bada chada ke batana, to kind of talk about things which may not have existed, but to create a false kind of an image and made grandpa and the reservation sound glamorous. Now, what exactly is reservation? This has got nothing to do with your train ticket reservation. It means the Rosebud Sioux reservation in South Dakota. Now, this is the ancestral home of Martin's great-grandfather and the Lakota tribe that he belongs to. The reservation, please note this down, the reservation is very distinct from the urban environment in different American cities, like the one where Martin lives. And the reservation represents the cultural heritage of the great-grandfather. So please remember this, that it is a representation of the cultural heritage of the great-grandfather. But when we would return home to Iowa, which is one of the places in USA, after our yearly summer visit to grandpa. So what does this show? That the mother ensured that every year during the summer vacation, they did spend time with the grandfather, great-grandfather, and they always came back with some exciting stories to tell to their friends. Now, a reservation is also a designated area of land where Native American tribes live. These reservations were established by the American government through legislation and executive orders. And because what happened was, as I said, if you remember the Chief Seattle speech, they had to move away from their native lands. So in return for their native lands, they were given some other land which were known as the reservation. Okay. Now, in the context of the story, so the reservation obviously represents a physical place, but it is also representative of a cultural and a family heritage. Okay. So it is here that Marty's great-grandfather, who is an elder of the Sioux tribes, lives, and where traditional customs and ways of life are maintained. We always had some authentic Sioux article to show to our listeners. Listeners are their classmates and friends. Article means some kind of artifact, some kind of old object, which kind of represents the cultural heritage of that reservation. One year, Cheryl had new moccasins that Grandpa had made. Now, moccasins are a kind of a shoe. Okay, it's not an eatable. It is a kind of a shoe which is traditionally made of soft leather and which is often deer skin, the skin of the deer. So it is made of deer skin most often, and the leather is very soft. It's a type of a shoe. So Cheryl had got some new moccasins that were prepared by the great-grandfather. Or let me say grandpa instead of going on confusing it. Okay. On another visit, he gave me a small, round, flat, rawhide drum, which was decorated with a painting of a warrior riding a horse. So it shows sense of bravery and courage and hunting, right? So that is what was represented on that. He taught me a real Sioux chant as in mantra, to sing while I beat the drum with a leather-covered stick that had a feather on the end. So you see, the entire imagery that is being created is rather exotic. Man, that really made an impression. So he showed the drum obviously to his friends and classmates. So they were obviously very impressed with what he had got, and the chant, etc., which was all very tribal and very exotic sounding when he was doing that. We never showed our friend's grandpa's picture. Okay. We never showed the picture. Well, what was the reason? Now, not that we were ashamed of it. So it was not because we were ashamed, but because we knew that the glamorous tales that we told did not go with the real thing. Now, this is a very ready-made reasoning question, because there is a clear because word put there. Martin and Cheryl never showed their friend's grandpa's picture because they knew that the glamorous tales that they told their friends did not quite match with the real, image of the grandfather, the way grandfather looked. Our friends would have laughed at the picture if they showed the picture, so they only created that impression. So there was an impression that was being created in the minds of the friends, but they dared not show the picture because then they thought, they were skeptical that the friends may laugh at the picture. So that's another reason that you can put, because grandpa was not tall. Because grandpa was not tall and stately like TV Indians. So see, of the red Indians or the native Indians, there was a certain image that was created. Indians does not mean Indians like us. Okay, just be careful. There was a certain image that was created because of the television shows in which they were shown as tall and bulky and very masculine and macho and very well built. That was not the case in the as far as the grandpa looked in real life. So they were skeptical that these children, the other friends, may actually laugh if they showed the photograph. His hair was not in braids, but hung in stringy gray strands on his neck. So it was not the braid, which is some kind of a hairstyle, but in strands. And he was old. He was not a young man. He was our great grandfather. So now he says, so he refers to him as grandpa, but he makes it very clear that he was his great grandfather. That is his grandfather's father. And he did not live in a teepee, but all by himself in a part log, part tar paper shack on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. So what he's saying is that teepee is a tent-like structure. Okay, it's a tent-like structure, but he did not live in that tent-like structure, but he lived in a shack, which is, if I have to use a Hindi word, it's like a jhopdi. It's a shack which you find in not in villages, I mean actually what you find in urban slums, etc. A shack at the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. That's where he lived. One second. Okay, so when grandpa came to visit us, I was so ashamed and embarrassed, I could have died. So he felt very embarrassed by the presence of his grandfather. There are a lot of EP poodles and other fancy little dogs in our neighborhood, but they usually bark singly at the mailman from the safety of their own yards. So he says there are a lot of different kinds of breeds of dogs in our neighborhood. Poodles, I mean, it's a this thing for dog. So he says that they do kind of make a noise when the postman comes, but they do that from inside their yard. You know, they don't go and try and attack the postman, the mailman. Okay. Now it sounded as if a whole pack of mutts were barking together in one place. So he was hearing only the sound. So sound imagery at place before the grandfather actually makes an entry into the story. We have been told a little bit about the grandfather, but we have not met the grandfather ourselves. Mutts is another, it's a slang for dogs. It's a slang word for dogs, American slang. So, this particular paragraph shows the reaction of describes the reaction of the dogs to the arrival of the grandpa. Okay. I got up and walked to the curb to see what the commotion was. Now, curb is a raised edge along the side of the street. That is a very less height of a footpath kind of a thing. A footpath in Indian cities is itna to bada rehta hai. Road yahan pe hai to itna to hota hai, more than 1 foot. But this was like a curb, is almost at the same level, just a little kind of a raised edge along the side of the street. To see what the commotion was. Ki shor sharaba kya hai? What is the noise about? About a block away, I saw a crowd of little kids yelling with the dogs yipping and growling around someone who was walking down the middle of the street. So there was one person walking and all these dogs were surrounding and barking at him. I watched the group as it slowly came closer and saw that in the center of the strange procession was a man. So there were kids shouting and the dogs growling, wearing a tall black hat. He would pause now and then to peer at something in his hand, and then at the houses on either side of the street. So what does it indicate? It indicates that he was lost. He was searching for an address. So he was obviously having it on a paper, and he was searching for that particular address. And he has described how he looked. I felt cold and hot because that's when he realized, oh my God, this is grandpa, right? That's how he whispered. There is almost like a husky tone. Oh no, it's grandpa. That's how he exclaims when he recognizes, and that's why he felt cold and hot. Yeah, that is, he's feeling cold. Cold is, he went cold. Bolte na. It's because cold is a reaction of shock and surprise. Hot because he realizes what it entails, that his friends, I mean, everybody has seen him. A lot of kids and the dogs are trying to attack and bark at him. So he feels tense at the same time. He also feels, very nervous at the same time. So that's a reaction of feeling cold and hot at the same time. I stood on the curb, unable to move, even though I wanted to run and hide. He did not want his grandpa to recognize him or spot him. Then I got mad when I saw how the yippy dogs were growling and nipping at the old man's baggy pant legs, and how wearily means tired, in a very tired manner, he poked them away with his cane. So he was trying to protect himself by using his cane to ensure they did not come very close to him or bite him. Stupid mutts, the dogs, I said as I ran to rescue grandpa from those mutts, from those dogs. So he's having that protective feeling also, even though he feels a little embarrassed by the presence of his grandpa, by the unexpected presence, because the grandpa obviously has not told them that he would be arriving. So they were not mentally prepared for his arrival. When I kicked and hollered at the dogs, okay, holler means to shout, okay, means to shout at the dogs to get away. They put their tails between their legs, means they got scared because of the shouting of Martin and scattered. They ran away in different directions. The kids ran to the curb where they watched me and the old man. Grandpa, I said, and I felt pretty dumb when my voice cracked. So he says, he's not able to speak in a very straight kind of tone because he's a little surprised, he's a little tense, he's a little worried about the reaction that would follow. I reached for his beat up old tin suitcase which was tied shut with a rope. So you can imagine that it's not a very fashionable kind of luggage. It's a little bit of a rickety piece of luggage that he is carrying. But he set it down right in the street and shook my hand. How Takosa, grandchild, he treated me formally in Sioux, in the Sioux language, right? Takosa also means grandchild. So what the author has done is to put the Sioux language and then immediately put the English word for it. So Takosa is the Sioux word for grandchild. All I could do was stand there with the whole neighborhood watching and shake the hand of the leather brown old man. So the entire neighborhood is seeing from wherever they are at the scene, because obviously a lot of commotion has been created as a result of the little kids shouting and the dogs barking. I saw how his gray hair straggled from under his big black hat. Straggle is as if to move slowly. So the hair is kind of moving very slowly from under his big black hat, which had a drooping feather in its crown. So the hat had a feather which was kind of drooping. It was not like erect, it was kind of drooping. His rumpled, that is crumpled, black suit hung like a sack over his stooped frame. So his shoulders were kind of stooping, and he was wearing some kind of a coat, which was looking more like a sack than a very smartly cut coat. As he shook my hand, his coat fell open to expose a bright red satin shirt with a beaded bolo tie under the collar. So he's giving a very detailed description of the kind of clothes that grandpa was wearing at that point in time, which you could remember. Just mark 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. The coat, what kind of a coat, what kind of a hat, what color shirt, the tie, etc. His getup wasn't out of place on the reservation. Now, what he wore, and this is important, his getup, that is the way he was dressed, he would look part of the scenery on the reservation, that he would not look out of place. He would not look like a stranger, that everybody would look like this, "Arey, ye kya pehna hai," kind of thing, So you will not look out of place. Just as an example, you are supposed to wear the uniform every day to school, which would be a shirt and a trouser and a skirt and a shirt in the case of girls. Imagine one day the girls go wearing a sari, or the boys go wearing a dhoti, an Indian kurta pajama or a dhoti. People would look at you with surprise. I mean, in the sense that you would be out of place in a school where everyone else would be wearing the uniform, and you would be only one wearing a bright red kurta and a dhoti or a bright blue color sari, right? You would look out of place. So it's a similar kind of a thing. And his getup was a little weird also, okay, with a feather, because who wears a hat with a feather in an American city? But it sure was here, and I wanted to sink right through the payment. I wanted to sink right through the payment indicates Martin's sense of shame and embarrassment, right? So he was feeling very embarrassed about the presence of the grandpa, because now that he has gone and met him, everyone would have come to know that, oh, there is some relationship between Martin and this old man. So everyone would have come to know. So he wanted to sink through. वो बोलते ना, धरती फट जाए मैं समा जाऊं, हिंदी में बोलते ना, जैसे some Hindi films का dialogue होता है. This is like that. He was feeling very ashamed and embarrassed, and he just wanted to disappear so that nobody would see him. "Hi," I muttered with my head down. Head down again indicates a sense of embarrassment when you are not looking at him in the eye. I tried to pull my hand away when I felt his bony hand. So it's obviously an old man, which not much of flesh, trembling. The hand was trembling, which indicates a sense of weakness. And I looked up to see fatigue in his face. That is, he was visibly exhausted. I felt like crying. कि मुझे रोना आ गया. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I picked up Grandpa's suitcase, that iron tin suitcase, took his arm, held him by the arm like this, and guided him up the driveway to our house. So he took him to his house. I don't know if you know, or if you have experienced, if you have any great grandparents, it's almost very funny. You feel the skin after an age, and I'm talking specifically about my grandmother. The skin would be very loose kind of thing. And I remember when my daughter Tejaswini was a child, she would play with my with my grandmother. So for her, she was the great grandmother, and she would kind of, relate very nicely with her and touch her here because the skin would be very soft and all that kind of thing. And it was very strange that a 90 plus person at that time got along so well with someone who was 5 years, 6 years old, kind of thing, and they used to play together, right? Very interesting relationship. So I mean, just as an aside, I think I've said this before many years back. When my grandmother was 90, I'll tell you, 2006. So she would have been 97, 96, 97. She was living with my uncle in Coimbatore. And I had gone to Coimbatore, and I told her in Tamil to grandmother is called Pati. So I said, Pati, will you come with me to Hyderabad? I'll take you by flight. So she was very excited because she had never gone on a plane before. And my uncles protested, saying that no, Sudhir is doing very crazy things. Can she take the stress? She will feel very tense when the aircraft takes off, and she will feel very tense. And all kinds of things were said to dissuade me from taking her by flight. But I wanted to give her that joy. I wanted her to experience the joy of going on on an aeroplane. So we booked the ticket. I didn't listen to any of them, and I have 5 uncles. They're quite dominating types. So I took her to flight, and she was so excited. She's looking out from the window, and she was so excited to see how it looks and all that. And she said, my sons are all crazy. They were unnecessarily saying that I will feel scared. This is so cool. I mean, I was like delighted. I was delighted to see how she reacted. Okay, just as an aside, this story made me remember my grandmother a lot. I felt very emotional. Anyway, Mom was standing on the steps. I don't know how long she had been watching, but her hand was over her mouth and she looked as if she couldn't believe what she saw. My mother, when I didn't tell my mother. She's my mother's mother. As I said, she passed away in 2011 at the age of 101. So I hadn't told my mother and father. So they were very surprised when they opened the door and found Pati standing at the door. So Mom was standing on the steps, and I don't know how long she had been watching, but hand was on her mouth in the sense that she was surprised, like this, when you're surprised, kind of a look she had. And she looked as if she couldn't believe what she saw, that she did not believe that her father had traveled all the way from the reservation, the Rosebud reservation, to come to the city. Then she ran to us. Grandpa, she gasped, how in the world did you get here? How did you manage to travel all this distance? She checked her move to embrace Grandpa. She checked the move means she kind of stopped for a moment before she embraced her grandfather. And I remember that such a display of affection is unseemly to the Sioux and would embarrass him. That he's not used to this kind of display of affection, and that would have embarrassed him. How, Mary? Okay, he said as he shook Mom's hand. That's her name. She smiled and took his other arm. As we supported him up the steps, the door banged open and Cheryl came bursting out of the house, the granddaughter, the great-granddaughter. She was all smiles and was obviously glad to see Grandpa, that I was ashamed of how I felt. So the contrast between Cheryl and Martin. This can be another reasoning question. The contrast between Cheryl and Martin, that while Martin had been embarrassed, Cheryl had no such negative emotions. She was delighted to see the great-grandfather. Grandpa, she yelled happily, you came to see us. It's unadulterated child's emotion. Grandpa smiled and Mom and I let go of him as he stretched out his arm to my 10-year-old sister who was still young enough to be hugged. Bisin Silla. I hope that's the way it's pronounced. Little girl. Now, it means in the Sioux language, it means little girl. He greeted her and then collapsed. Now the fatigue, the exhaustion got the better of him and he collapsed. He had fainted. Mom and I carried him into her sewing room where she did her tailoring work, where we had a spare bed. After we had Grandpa on the bed, Mom stood there helplessly patting his shoulder. Shouldn't we call the doctor, Mom? I suggested, since she did not seem to know what to do. Yes, she agreed with a sigh. You make Grandpa comfortable, that you take care of him, Martin. I reluctantly moved to the bed. I knew Grandpa wouldn't want to have Mom undress him because that wouldn't be proper. He would feel embarrassed. But I did not want to do that either. He was so skinny and frail. Frail means very thin, that his coat slipped off easily. When I loosened his tie and opened his shirt collar, I felt a small leather pouch that hung from a thong around his neck. So it was hanging out here. I left it alone and moved to remove his boots. The scuffed old cowboy boots, the cowboy boots that you wear, the long ones, were tight, and he moaned as I put pressure on his leg to jerk them off. It's a little difficult to remove them unless you kind of bring down the entire zip, which may or may not have been in this particular case. I put the boots on the floor and saw why they fit so tight. Now, another reasoning question. I'm going on pointing out the reasoning question so that it becomes easier for you to practice also, and you keep that in mind. Anywhere you see a because kind of a sentiment, please make a note that this could be a reasoning question. Ek mark ka sawal hai. Okay. The reason was that each one of those shoes was stuffed with money. I looked at the bills means the currency notes that lined the boots, and started to ask about them, but Grandpa's eyes were closed again. So he was kind of either sleeping or he was still in that state of having fainted. Mom came back with the basin of water. The doctor thinks Grandpa is suffering from heat exhaustion, so a heat stroke kind of a thing. She explained as she bathed Grandpa's face. So obviously she has had a word with the doctor. Mom gave a big sigh. Oh, Martin, how do you suppose he got here? Now use of this kind of Sioux words like hin are to lend credibility to the way they speak. That she also, though she is married to a white man, she still manages to speak a bit of Sioux language, is what the author wants to convey. H-I-N-H refers to owl as in Ullu, but it is not meant to in a derogatory sense. It is meant to convey wisdom. Okay, someone wise. So she's referring to her son as a wise boy. How do you suppose he got here? How do you think he got here? We found out after the doctor's visit. Grandpa was angrily sitting up in bed while Mom tried to feed him some soup so that he gets some energy. Tonight you let Mary feed you, Grandpa, spoke my dad, who had gotten home from work just as the doctor was leaving. That, he said, let your granddaughter feed you today. You are not really sick, he said as he gently pushed Grandpa back against the pillows. The doctor said, you just got too tired and hot after a long trip. So it's just a case of exhaustion because of the heat and the distance that he has traveled. Grandpa relaxed, and between sips of soup, he told us of his journey. Soon after our visit to him, during the summer vacation, Grandpa had decided that he would like to see where his only living descendants, where, the only people who he could call family, he wanted to see where they lived and what our home looked like. It's natural curiosity. Besides, he admitted sheepishly means in the sense of embarrassment, he was feeling lonesome after we left, which is always the case. I remember when we as children during a summer vacation used to go to my grandmother's house. She used to live in this huge house all by herself, and it was surrounded by a mini forest of kind, full of coconut, tamarind, jackfruit, mango trees, lots of vegetables. It was full, the two wells. So in that sense, a lot of land, but she lived there alone. Very courageous woman. Didn't feel scared. And when it used to rain in Kerala, in Thrissur district they used to stay, it would just keep raining. Anyone could feel. In fact, very funny incident. In fact, her best friend was living in 2 houses away. These are all like, with huge land. So she was also a widow who would stay alone. So my grandmother did not want to go and stay with any of her sons. As I said, 5 sons and 1 daughter, which is my mother. But she would say, I will stay here only. This was the house built by my grandfather, by my great-grandfather. So once in the night, I'm sorry if I'm boring you with these stories, but I just feel, I thought it would just interest you. If you feel, just forward it. Just go interest now. One thief got into the house at night. She did not feel scared. She actually engaged him in a conversation, because he was also one of those locals who did not have any money. So he had come to steal something. And she said, nothing is there. So don't try to look here and there. because there is nothing here valuable that you can actually steal. There are only my saris, etc., and which are only 3-4 of them, and there is no jewelry. I don't wear any jewelry, and there is hardly any money, so don't waste your time. She actually engaged him in a conversation. Otherwise, anyone, and she would have been in her let me say late 60s or 70s at that time. Okay, so she would live there all by herself. But every time when we would leave after our summer vacation, I'm feeling emotional. She would feel very emotional. Because you go, my mother, my father, my sister, sometimes some cousins would come, and for about 3 weeks, a month or so, there will be a lot of activity in the house. We would go here and there, etc. She would buy us clothes. We would buy her a sari. All that would happen, and at the end of the vacation, when you would leave, she would feel very lonely, because then that big house would just be her alone. Sorry. I tend to get very emotional. It's very fond of her. I knew everybody felt as guilty as I did, especially mom, that they had left him alone. Mom was all grandpa had left. So for him, she was the only blood relation who was there, and of course now she was married to a white man. So the grandchildren were a bit of a mixed kind of heritage, but as far as the mother was concerned, she was very special. Mary. So even after she had married my dad, who was a white man and teaches in the college in our city, and after Cheryl and I were born, mom made sure that every summer we spent a week with grandpa. Okay. I never thought, this can also be a reasoning question, this particular paragraph. I never thought that grandpa would be lonely after our visits, and none of us noticed how old and weak he had become, because we don't quite notice. Children don't quite notice. We think they're always remain the same. We always think our parents will never age, but we all age, right? But grandpa knew, and so he came to us. He had ridden on buses. I read this fantastic quote by someone who was very elderly in the 60s. And she said, I want to apologize to every 30-year-old person who I called an old person when I was 18. You get the point? When he arrived in the city, tired and stiff from sitting for so long, because it had been a long journey, he set out walking to find us. He had stopped to rest on the steps of some building downtown. Now basically they come to know how he had managed to reach their house. The cop, according to grandpa, was a good man who took him to the bus stop and waited until the bus came and told the driver to let grandpa at Bellevue Drive. That's where they stayed. Mary and the family. After grandpa got off the bus, he started walking again, but he couldn't see the house numbers on the other side when he walked on the sidewalk. So he walked in the middle of the street, where he attracted all the attention of the kids and the dogs. I knew everybody felt as bad as I did, yet I was proud of this 86-year-old man. So now you know the age of the great-grandfather also, who had never been away from the reservation. He had never come out of that place, having the courage to travel so far alone. So it needed a lot of courage to come to an absolutely strange-looking city. You found the money in my boots? He asked mom. Martin did, she answered, and roused herself to scold. Grandpa, you should not have carried so much money. What if someone had stolen it from you? Grandpa laughed. I would have known if anyone tried to take the boots off my feet. So what does it show? It shows a very practical side to the grandfather with relation to matters of money. That, agar koi shoe mera utarta, to mere ko pata chalta. And in any case, it was difficult to take off the boots. The money is what I have saved for a long time, $100 for my funeral. So he's kind of ensuring that, even for my funeral, my family need not spend their own money. I'm going to leave the money for my funeral. But since he has come this time to the city, He says, you take it now to buy groceries so that I won't be a burden to you while I'm here. That he does not want them to spend their money on him while he's there living with them. So he says, you take this money so that you can use it for grocery. Okay, so he is very, so what does it show? It shows that he is a very considerate person who thinks from the other person's point of view. It's quite possible that the children would have felt, "Arey, we are financially not well off." They not, that's not the case, but it's quite possible in some cases that they may resent his arrival, thinking that it would add to their expenditure. Okay, so she says that won't be. Dad says that won't be necessary, Grandpa. We are honored to have you with us, and you will never be a burden. So it shows it's a very nice family. I'm only sorry that we never thought of bringing you home. We never thought that we could actually bring you home with us this summer and spare you the discomfort of a long trip. So if you had traveled with us, you would not have had to undertake this kind of a difficult and tiring trip. Grandpa was pleased. Thank you, he answered. But do not feel bad that you did not bring me with you, for I would not have come at that time. At that time, if you had invited me and said, come along, I would not have come, because that was not the time. He said this in such a way that no one could argue with him. He said it in a very clear manner कि वो समय नहीं आया था कि मैं तुम्हारे साथ यहाँ पर शहर में आऊं. That time had not come. To Grandpa and the Sioux, he once told me, a thing would be done when it was the right time to do it, and that is the way it was. So during one of their summer vacation breaks, he had told that everything is done at the right time, and only then it would be done, and that's the way it is always done. That's the way it is, the tradition. Also, Grandpa went on looking at me. I have come here because it is soon time for Martin to have the medicine bag. I have come here to pass on the medicine bag to Martin. We all knew what that meant. Grandpa thought he was going to die, and he had to follow. And this particular paragraph is important because this gives you an idea about the cultural tradition which is followed on the reservation in the tribe. So we all knew what that meant. Grandpa thought he was going to die, and he had to follow the tradition of his family to pass the medicine bag along with its history to the oldest male child. Okay, even though the boy, he said, still looking at me, bears a white man's name because the father is a white, the medicine bag will be his. I did not know what to say. I had the same hot and cold feeling which he felt at that time when he first saw Grandpa in the street. The medicine bag was the dirty leather pouch that I had found around his neck. So he realized, oh, that's the medicine bag. I could never wear such a thing. He's kind of taken aback, and he almost says it aloud, as if someone could hear him. I thought, oh my God, my friends will see it at the gym class, right, where he would probably be wearing just a vest, or at the swimming pool where he will be bare-chested, and could imagine the strange things they would say. What will they say? So you realize that Martin is someone who thinks a lot about how others would react. He's not someone who is very sure about himself, or someone who does not care or wouldn't care how others would react. He feels a lot, he cares a lot about, which is not a very good thing, because जिंदगी में हमेशा दूसरों के बारे में सोचते रहोगे कि लोग क्या कहेंगे, then you can never do what you really want to do. Okay. And I could imagine the smart things they would say, but I just swallowed hard and took a step towards the bed. I knew I would have to take it. So he's not someone who is a kind of person who will say, no, I will not take it. उसमें वो हिम्मत भी नहीं है. But he's also at the same time not really in favor of taking it. But Grandpa was tired. Not now, Martin. It's not time. Waving his hand in dismissal, कि अभी चले जाओ. Now I will sleep. So that's how Grandpa came to be with us for 2 months. So for 2 months, Grandpa was with them. My friends kept asking to come see the old man, but I put them off. No, don't come, kind of thing. I told myself that I did not want them laughing at Grandpa. So again, the same problem. He thought they would all come and laugh at Grandpa. He was also worried about being mocked at for having such a grandfather, because he had built up a lot of stories, and they would say, "Arey, dekho, Martin has told all these things and look at the way he looks." So he was scared of how they would react. So, but even as I made excuses, I know it was not Grandpa, but I was afraid they would laugh at. Okay, so that this is another reasoning kind of question that you could be asked. Nothing bothered Cheryl. Now Cheryl bindas thi. Usko koi farak nahi padta tha. So she brought her friends to see grandpa. Every day after school started, there would be a crew, means a large group of giggling, kiki, little girls or round-eyed little boys, because she was younger, 10-year-old, crowded around the old man on the patio. Patio is like a sit-out kind of a thing, a place to sit in the front side outside an independent house, where he had gotten in the habit of sitting every afternoon. So every afternoon he would sit in that open space, and that's where all these little boys and little girls would crowd around grandpa. Grandpa would smile in his gentle way and patiently answer their questions, or he would tell them stories of brave warriors, ghosts, animals, and the kids listened in awed silence. Huh? So they would be completely in awe of the kind of stories that he would tell. Those little guys thought grandpa was great. So they were completely in awe of the grandfather. Finally, one day after school, my friends came home with me because nothing I had said stopped them. So there came a time in between those 2 months when the friends would no longer listen to Martin and they decided to come home. We are going to see the great Indian of Bellevue Drive. That's what they said Hank, who was supposed to be my best friend. My brother has seen him 3 times, that is, who must have been Cheryl's friend. So he ought to be well enough to see us. That is, if he can see him, so can we. When we got to my house, grandpa was sitting on the patio. He had on his red shirt, but today he also wore a fringed leather vest that was decorated with beads. So again, an exotic looking costume. Instead of his usual cowboy boots, he had solidly beaded moccasins, that's the soft leather deerskin shoe, on his feet that stuck out of his black trousers. So a detailed description of what he was wearing. Of course, he had his old black hat on. He was seldom without it. That is, rarely would you find him without it. But it had been brushed, and the feather in the beaded headband was now proudly erect. It was not drooping the way it was on the day he had arrived. Its tip was a brighter white. His hair lay in silver strands over his red shirt collar. I stared just as my friends did, and I heard one of them murmur, "Wow." So they were, what does it convey? It conveys admiration for the way he looked. Please note down the details of the description at both places, when he arrived and right now, because these can be the 5-mark question kind of, the 5-mark questions. Okay. Now, grandpa looked up, and when his eyes met mine, they twinkled as if he were laughing inside. He nodded to me, and my face got all hot. So you realize that he tends to get nervous and anxious quite often. I could tell that he had known all along that I was afraid that he would embarrass me in front of my friends. Now, there are many grandparents, if you become your friends, they would move away into one of their rooms. They wouldn't want to sit around kind of a thing. There would be some grandparents who would engage in a conversation with your friends. So there are grandparents of different kinds. Now, he realized that Martin always felt that his presence or his way of talking or the way he looked would embarrass Martin in front of his friends. How? Hoxilas boy. So Hoxilas is the Sioux language for boys. He greeted and held out his hand. My buddies passed in a single file, that is almost queued up, and shook his hand as I introduced them to grandpa. They were so polite, I almost laughed that this is not the usual rowdy manner in which they conducted themselves, but they were rather polite today in front of grandpa. How there, grandpa, and even a how do you do, sir? You look fine, grandpa, I said as the guy sat on the lawn chairs or on the patio floor. Now he's trying to cover himself up. So he's saying, "Oh, you look fine," as if to say that so far, you are not in a position where you could meet with my friends, but today you are looking just fine. "Ah, yes," he agreed. "When I woke up this morning, it seemed the right time to dress in the good clothes. I knew that my grandson would be bringing his friends." So he's also playing along. He's not trying to kind of, put him down in front of his friends. So he's also playing along with Martin. "You guys want some lemonade or something?" I offered. No one answered. They were listening to grandpa as he started telling how he had killed the deer from which his vest was made. Okay, so he started telling them stories about his hunting expeditions. Grandpa did most of the talking while my friends were there. I was so proud of him and amazed at how respectfully quiet my buddies were. Now, here you also realize one point, that Martin does not quite know his friends very well. He thinks that, they would laugh at him, that they would mock him. On the contrary, they are completely in awe of how the grandpa looked and spoke. Mom had to chase them home at supper time, that all of you go home now because it's getting very late. As they left, they shook Grandpa's hand again and said to me, Martin is really great. Yeah, man, don't blame you for keeping him to yourself. Keeping him to yourself means that his friends thought that Martin did not want to share his grandpa with them. So that's how they have interpreted it. Martin's real reason we already know, but the friends thought that Martin did not want to share his great-grandfather with him. Therefore, he was not allowing them to meet his grandpa, come home and meet his grandpa. Can we come back? But after they left, Mom said, no more visitors for a while, Martin. Grandpa won't admit it, but his strength has not returned. He's not, returned to his full vigor. He likes having company. He likes to talk to people, but it tires him. That evening, Grandpa called me to his room before he went to sleep. Tomorrow, he said, when you come home, it will be time to give you the medicine back. So tomorrow is the D-Day. Tomorrow is the D-Day when you will be given the medicine back by me. Now, I felt a hard squeeze from where my heart is supposed to be. So his heart is almost like skipping a beat and it's almost like there's a bit of a pain. And I was scared, but I answered, okay, Grandpa, right? So he kind of felt a little scared because he knew that he was passing on the bag because he knew Grandpa thought he was going to die. All night I had weird dreams about thunder and lightning on a high hill. So he's kind of getting this kind of nightmare. He's getting bad dreams. From a distance, I heard the slow beat of a drum. When I woke up in the morning, I felt as if I had not slept at all. So he had a very disturbed sleep with all those kind of dreams. At school, it seemed as if the day would never end. And when it finally did, I ran home. So he was feeling a little apprehensive, anxious, and scared and worried because he knew the circumstances under which the bag would be given to him. Weird dreams because he was very tense and anxious. Grandpa was in his room sitting on the bed. The shades were down. Okay, it was covered. The windows were covered. And the place was dim and cool. So there was not harsh sunlight coming into the room. I sat on the floor in front of Grandpa, but he did not even look at me. After what seemed like a long time, he spoke. He said, I sent your mother and sister away because what you will hear today is only for a man's ear. So it's a bit of a patriarchal kind of a thing. Okay, it's a bit of a patriarchal kind of a thing where, it is supposed to go from a man to a man, and the women of the family are not meant to hear it. So it is a bit of a patriarchal kind of an attitude. You can use this word in your answers. What you will receive is only for a man's hands. He fell silent and I felt shivers down my back. And now we are getting into the more complex part of the story where I will have to explain in great detail. Okay. Because only then I will be doing justice to it. Otherwise, सीधा बता के में फायदा नहीं है. Summary नहीं करना है. Because that's the heart of the story. My father in his early manhood, that is when he had become an adult, made a vision quest. That is, quest means to go in search of something. Vision means, some kind of a foresight to find a spirit guide for his life. Again, refer to Chief Seattle's speech, where also they talk about, how the ancestors would kind of take care of them. Remember, अगर treasure trove अभी भी बची हुई है, कबाड़ी में नहीं दी तो निकाल के पढ़ो. Okay. You cannot understand how it was in at that time when the great Teton Sioux was first made to stay on the reservation. So he's talking about some ancestor of his. There was a strong need for guidance from Wakan Tanka, the great spirit. So you're talking about, the gods of the reservation. So made a vision quest. Now let me tell you one by one. Okay. Made a vision quest ka meaning hai, a vision quest is a spiritual ritual that is puja practiced by some Native American tribes, particularly the Lakota people in this particular story. What it involves is to go alone, go on a solitary journey into nature. Don't listen to this at 1.25 or 1.5 speed. Listen to it at normal speed so that you can take down notes. Keep pausing and taking down notes. It involves going on a solitary journey into nature. Okay, during which you are either fasting, you are also praying, you are trying to seek some kind of guidance from a spiritual connection. This is the meaning of made a vision quest. Okay, to find a spirit guide for his life. What does it mean? The purpose of the vision quest was to connect with a spiritual being. It could be an animal also, who will offer to this young man, that is the grandpa's father, who was in his early manhood, that means he was a young man. It would offer wisdom to the young man. It would also offer him strength and direction throughout his life. Okay. There was a strong need for guidance from Vakantaka. What does this particular line mean? This line emphasizes the importance of spiritual connection in the Lakota culture. Okay, tribal culture. Vakantaka is the Lakota term for the Great Spirit. Vakantaka, it means the Great Spirit. It is the Lakota term. Okay, it is Vakantaka is the creator and source of all things. That's what they believe. Like in Hindu mythology, I mean, just to kind of help you understand better, we believe, we first pray to Lord Ganesha, right? Vinayaka, because he's supposed to take care of a lot of things. So first puja is always done to Lord Ganapati, right? Similarly here, Vakantaka is the Lakota term for the Great Spirit, and he seemed to be the creator and source of all things. And the young man, that is the grandpa's father, seeks guidance during a difficult time for his people. So what these lines essentially do, this particular paragraph and the paragraph that will follow, they are introducing you and me, the reader, to the Lakota tradition of going in search, going in quest for a vision, and they highlight the need for a spiritual kind of a connection, spiritual guidance at a time when the tribals are going through a lot of hardship. It could mean that they would have been asked to move to another place, another reservation. So this basically sets the tone for the story to explore the need for cultural identity. Okay, the theme of loss of cultural identity, the theme of search for a cultural identity, and the importance of maintaining that cultural identity and tradition. So isko ye paragraph emphasize karta hai. So he found, uske baad, they thought that it was hopeless to search for a vision when the glorious life was gone and only the hated confines of a reservation. Hated confines means the reservation will be a bound space, right? Because that's the land which has been given to them by the American government of the whites. So it would be a hated. So it would be hated because they would no longer be independent to go anywhere. They would have to be confined there, which is why the grandpa is for the first time venturing out of the reservation. He has never stepped out of the reservation. But my father held on to the old ways. That is grandpa's father. He carefully prepared for his quest with a purifying sweat bath. AC on karo to thand lagti hai, off karo to garmi lagti hai. So he carefully prepared with a purifying sweat bath, and then he went alone to a high butte. Now butte is a tall, flat-topped, steep side towers of a rock. So a rocky surface, but it's a flat top, okay, where you could actually go and sit. And there he went to fast and pray. After 3 days, he received his sacred dream, in which he found, after long searching, the white man's iron. Now, what does this mean? Now, this is the most important aspect of this particular story, one of the more important aspects of the story. This tells that the protagonist found a piece of metal. Okay, I'm deliberately saying it very slowly and emphasizing it so that you can write it down. This metal may have been found from some kind of a tool during his vision quest, and white man's iron, it signifies an object which is associated with the whites, with the colonizers, who were actually considered enemies at that time. Okay, so he did not understand his vision of finding something belonging to the white people. So white man ka iron, they are enemies. They are the ones who have uprooted us. Why should my quest end with finding the white man's iron? What is really the need for that? So it kind of confuses him. He did not understand his vision of finding something which belongs to the white people because they were the enemy. So it kind of also highlights the confusion in the mind of the father of the great grandfather. So he's like great grandfather. So finding an object which was associated with the enemy during a spiritual quest for guidance seems rather contradictory. It seems rather contradictory, and I don't think there is any clear explanation for that. So when he came down from the butte to cleanse himself at the stream below, he found the remains of a campfire and the broken shell of an iron kettle. This was a sign which reinforced his dream. He took a piece of the iron for his medicine bag, which he had made of elk skin years before to prepare for his quest. Now, the protagonist, when he finds the broken shell of an iron kettle, he interprets this particular object as confirmation of his dream vision that there is some kind of a deeper meaning to discover the white man's iron. It's a piece of iron, right? So there is some kind of a deeper meaning to finding that particular iron. So he has taken that piece of iron for his medicine bag. And this line reveals the protagonist's decision that he keeps a piece of that iron, signifying its importance within his spiritual journey. Elk is a member of the deer family. Okay, so this is also with deer skin. He returned to his village where he told his dream to the wise old men of the tribe. They gave him the name Iron Shell. So that's how the name came about. But neither did they understand the meaning of the dream. So they did not understand the dream ka matlab kya hai. This first iron shell kept the piece of iron with him at all times and believed it gave him protection from the evils of those unhappy days. So that was the belief that if I keep the iron with me, even though it's a white man's iron, it has come to him in his dream. So there must be some kind of a spiritual meaning and it will keep him safe from all kinds of evils during the present unhappy days. Then a terrible thing happened to Iron Shell. He and several other young men were taken away from their homes by the soldiers, the American soldiers, and sent far away to a white man's boarding school. He was angry and lonesome for his parents, and he felt they would be very lonely, and the young girl he had wed before he was taken away. At first, Iron Shell resisted the teacher's attempts to change him, and he did not try to learn. One day, it was his turn to work in the school's blacksmith shop. As he walked into the place, he knew that the medicine he had brought him to learn and work with the white man's iron. So blacksmith is a lohar who works with iron. So there is a connection. So this is what may have it come to. That, I discovered the iron and I become a blacksmith because during this journey. So the vision basically could symbolize the need for the people of that tribe, the Lakota tribe, to adapt to the changing world which has been brought by the white man's arrival. And the iron piece could also symbolize the tools and the technologies which have been brought by the white man, and that would be necessary even for the people of the reservation in order to work and survive. So basically, it is showing a way to coexist with the white man. कि हमको अगर white man हमको इसी जमीन पर रहना है, even though we are going to stay in that reservation, but we have to stay with the white people on the same land in the same country. So if we have to do that, we have to coexist. If we have to coexist, we need to know what the other person also does. So even though on the face of it, we are enemies, the iron could actually be a bridge between the two cultures, the white man's cultures and the Lakota tribal culture. So he becomes a blacksmith. So there is that kind of a connection with the future. And he believed that it will protect him from the evils of those unhappy days. And so Iron Shell became a blacksmith and worked at the trade when he returned to the reservation. So he came back to the reservation. All of his life, he treasured the medicine bag. When he was old and I was a man, he gave it to me, for no one made the vision quest anymore. तो उसके बाद कोई अंदर जाके vision quest नहीं करता था. So he just passed the medicine bag to the great grandfather. Grandpa stopped talking. He quit talking and I stared in disbelief, listening to this very fascinating story as he covered his face with his hands. His shoulders were shaking with quiet sobs because he was obviously feeling emotional about his father. And I looked away until he began to speak again. He says, I kept the bag until my son, that is your mother's father, was a man, because then I wanted to pass it on to my son. And he had to leave us to fight in the war across the ocean. So he was sent across the ocean to fight in a war. I gave him the bag because I thought it will protect him in the battle, but he did not take it with him. He was afraid that he would lose the bag, so he did not take it with him, and he died in the faraway place. So the medicine bag was never passed on to the next male heir. Okay. So not passed on to the next male heir. Again, grandpa was still, and I felt his grief around him. So now he's feeling the grief of his son's death, the father's death, and now he's feeling the grief of his son's death. My son, he went on after clearing. Again, grandpa was still, and I felt his grief around me. My son, he went on after clearing his throat, had only a daughter, that is your mother, and it is not proper for her to know of these things. He unbuttoned his shirt, pulled out the leather pouch, and lifted it over his head. He held it in his hand, turning it over and over as if memorizing how it looked. In the bag, he said as he opened and removed two objects, is the broken shell of the iron kettle, which his father had found, a pebble from the butte, from that rock, and a piece of the sacred sage. So please remember the three things which are there, because you would need to use them in your answers. Okay, very important information. So the sacred sage kya hai? Sage is a plant commonly used by many Native American tribes for its medicinal and spiritual properties. It is often burnt in purification ceremonies, and it is also used to bless different kinds of objects. In this particular story, the medicine bag, the sage represents a connection with the Lakota world of cultural identity and traditions. Okay, so the sage presence in the bag, because as I said, it's a plant, it also conveys a connection to their ancestral homeland, okay, where the Lakota people lived. It's a continuity of tradition. The grandfather kind of passes it on. So after the bag, he held the pouch upside down and dust drifted down, under symmetrically. After the bag is yours, you must put a piece of prairie sage within, that is a sage, and never open it again until you pass it on to your son. Okay, so the grandfather is instructing Martin to replace the sacred sage when he returns to the reservation. I stood up somehow, knowing he replaced the pebble and the piece of iron and tied the bag. I stood up somehow, knowing I should. Grandpa slowly rose from the bed and stood upright in front of me, holding the bag before my face. I closed my eyes and waited for him to slip it over my head, but he spoke. He didn't make him wear it. He just spoke. No, you need not wear it. He placed the soft leather bag in my right hand, that he's passed it on to him, and closed my other hand over him like this. Okay. It would not be right for you to wear it in this time and place, not in this kind of a surrounding where no one will understand. When you go to the gym or the swimming pool, put it safely away until you are again on the reservation. Only when you come on the reservation, you should wear it. Wear it then when you replace the sacred sage. So he wants him to replace the sacred sage. So he's instructing Martin to replace the sacred sage when he returns to the reservation. So this act of replacing the sacred sage with another one, it symbolizes the passing of tradition and cultural heritage from one generation to another. Because you see, the grandpa has not passed it on for two generations. He could not pass it on to his son. He could not pass it on to his son's child, who is a daughter. So now he's getting an opportunity to pass it on for the first time. So the medicine bag with the renewed sage, that is a plant, it will become a link between the present, the past, and the future, because he says you should pass it on to your child. By placing the sage in the medicine bag, grandpa turned and sat down on the bed. Wearily means with a very tired look. He leaned his head against the pillow. Go, he said, I will sleep now. Thank you, Grandpa, I said softly and left with the bag in my hands. That night, Mom and Dad took Grandpa to the hospital. 2 weeks later, he has passed away. 2 weeks later, I stood alone on the lonely prairie. Prairie is a grassland kind of a thing of the reservation. It's open zameen, and put the sacred sage in my medicine bag. So he fulfills the last wish of his grandpa. So by placing the sage in the medicine bag, Martin fulfills his great grandfather's final wish and takes a step. He embraces his Lakota tribal heritage. Please use this phrase also. He embraces his Lakota tribal heritage. So basically, it is a powerful symbol. The medicine bag is a powerful symbol of connection to the land. Okay. Land to it's a symbol of spirituality. Also, it is a symbol of cultural continuity. Please use all these phrases, especially in a 10-mark answer. And finally, and this is very important, it symbolizes Martin's own personal growth. Because from the Martin we saw in the beginning of the story to the Martin at the end of the story, he has come a long way, isn't it? So that is what this particular way of the putting the sacred sage inside the medicine bag actually conveys as far as Martin is concerned. With that, I come to the end of this particular explanation video. I hope I've done justice to it with a lot of detail. I've explained every word, every line, and I've explained the themes in great detail. A lot of work went into preparing for this chapter, and I hope you appreciate that. And you would be able to do justice. As I said, after this, listening to the thing, read the notes. I would put some of the short notes on the Instagram page as well. And then you go for the item bank on the CISC website, buy the Oswald book. Don't forget the coupon code. See, please save as much money as you can save for your parents. Always do that. I am saying that as a parent, wherever you can. So, yeah, that should be enough. And if you do that, you should be reasonably prepared. You could also look at the sample papers later on. You could kind of get pre-board papers from your other friends in other schools, and that would all help you practice and prepare better for your board exams. Okay, tata, bye bye. Thank you very much.